those riders as we go on the air. I don't believe we've had any official confirmation on Ayumu Sasaki's progress yet, although the information we're hearing in the paddock suggests that we might not see much more of him in this Grand Prix weekend. What we can confirm to you is that Adrian Huertas will not take any further part in this weekend after his high side at turn 6 earlier on this morning. Unfortunately, he's fractured both arms, which means that he is absent. And this man, Diogo Moreira, goes in alone for Italtrans for the rest of the weekend, looking to achieve that crowned world champion. Those are the scenarios awaiting both title contenders this weekend. Diogo Moreira, who we just saw, Manu Gonzalez, who now plays the role of chaser, to overhaul a 24-point deficit, something that has never been done before, the final round of a Grand Prix World Championship. Lewis Sotheby and Neil Morrison with you for our final Moto2 practice of the season. And Manu Gonzalez really does need Diogo Moreira to slip on a banana peel this weekend to open the door for him to win the World Championship. If there are some situations this weekend which could trip Diogo Moreira up, this session potentially one of them.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if we'll see one or two little mind games at play. We saw that certainly in the Friday afternoon practice session when we last visited Valencia in 2023 in MotoGP between Bagnaia and Jorge Martin. Martin was using some dark arts on that particular occasion to ensure that Bagnaia did not get into the top 10 or the end play. Sure if Gonzalez really will see the point of it. We saw both riders on track earlier in FP1. Constant game between them both. So we saw Jake Dixon there getting a quick reminder of what was going on his crew chief. He hit Martin in the back of his head.
It's got sponsored hair.
It's really
power, if nothing else. Here's Ethan Guevara, who we're pleased to see is leathered up and ready to head back out on circuit this afternoon. He did, we believe, go for a precautionary trip to hospital earlier on today just to give himself the once-over after going up and over twice earlier on today. Went down, first rider to crash this morning at turn 6. It certainly was not the last, as the session was interrupted due to a red flag as they tried to mop up any fluids or moisture that was still on the track surface. Session then resumed. Guevara quickly crashed again at turn 4, high side on the way out of the second gear right-hander. So we might not be showing it there, but Ethan Guevara surely in a little bit of pain as he gears up for this second session, which can't go any worse than the first nearly.
As he stays in 2 wheels, that will be a market improvement for this morning. Aaron Kitt, Ned, you have to imagine, will be a challenger this weekend just based on his previous record here. This is his home track. Looking to leave what has largely been a very successful spell with the Pantic Racing Team on a positive note. It was 13th this morning, although times were exceptionally tight. Kinnett just over half a second off. That's Scridge's quickest time. Not sure, Lewis, if any of FP1 is really going to be a big guide as to how this weekend will play out. That might well prove to be wrong. As ever, we feel the session here will give us a much better idea of who is exactly where. Steve Vietti will be looking to improve on a wretched racing run. 8 points across the last 5 runs for the Italian, who won his home Grand Prix and then went on to really not do very much during the flyaway runs. Pinon scores a 19th, 11th and 13th last time on in Portugal after he had been fighting for the podium positions early on.
That's Philip Salach, who was another faller earlier on today. Down turn 6 as well. There's a fairly lengthy list of riders who could go down there either side of the stoppage. Salach ending the session in 18th place. So close it was though in Moto2 earlier on today. Top 19 covered by just 3/4 of a second back to Marcos Ramirez. So it's going to be a tight old battle at the end of this session to see who advances through to qualifying 2. And as mentioned, this is perhaps one of these sessions in the weekend where Diogo Moreira is not going to win the World Championship. This is where he could potentially lose it. It is a weekend of navigating his way through some potential traps this weekend for the Brazilian. He gets himself through this session and into the top 14. He guarantees himself a place in the top 18 on the grid tomorrow, which is so much of the hard work done when you only need 14th place or higher to win the World Championship. Just to reiterate, as you saw on screen a moment ago, if Diogo Moreira finishes 14th, it's immaterial what Manu Gonzalez does this weekend. But Manu Gonzalez needs to win the Grand Prix or his hopes are gone. Gonzalez wins and Moreira is 14th or higher, Moreira is champion. Gonzalez wins and Moreira is $15 lower. Gonzalez is champion.
Yeah, you don't need us to tell you that is a tall order for Manu Gonzalez to come away with the Moto2 Championship crown in the play here on Sunday. Manu hasn't been on podium for 7 races, I think, is estimate to how long those odds are. Winning the championship has also won 12 races without victory. So it is by no means a given number 18 will be on the top step of the podium on Sunday, which I think is another reason why Moreira really can't come into this weekend with obviously there's going to be pressure there, no question, but not really serious pressure, I don't feel. Disagree though, when we get to tomorrow, maybe even towards the end of this session, Diogo did of course admit to some nerves in the early laps of the Portuguese Grand Prix when he didn't quite ride in with the usual fluency, put himself up front and ahead of Colin Veyer, and the Dutchman got in front of him. He was able to settle down and get into a rhythm, and then of course what was ultimately the most impressive performance of his Grand Prix career. One of the reasons why Moreira is very much in the driving seat here this weekend.
Another rider who impressed us in Portimao was David Alonso. As you saw there, he's currently 7th in the World Championship and likely to stay there. He's 4 points ahead of Celestino Vietti, who is in pretty poor form at the moment. Of course, Alonso comes here on the back of 3 consecutive podiums. They haven't come in time though for him to keep himself in the Rookie of the Year chase this weekend. That was wrapped up in Portimao by his teammate Danny Holgado. 27 needed 7th place or higher to clinch the Rookie of the Year, and 7th is exactly where he finished on the Algarve coast 5 days ago.
Yeah, really impressive late season run from David Alonso. In fact, a really impressive second half of the season. When you look at the points scored across the last 9 races, Alonso would actually be 3rd in that particular championship. The rider that heads that little championship over the last 9 races is this name here, Diogo Moreira, just like he heads the overall championship. Information on your screen: 14th place will suffice to become Brazil's first ever motorcycle Grand Prix world champion. It is a massive deal, a massive honour. Moreira has hit peak form at exactly the right time. Lead the championship for the first time with just 2 races remaining in this year's championship. That shows that he really has timed his late run to perfection.
It's MotoGP in his future. He will be testing an LCR Honda for the very first time on Tuesday. It's such an intriguing day of testing as 2026 gets underway. Tuesday morning we'll have full coverage here from the Ricardo Tomo circuit from just before 10 AM as we now see some confirmation from the team of Emi Sasaki's absence from the rest of the weekend. Haven't received any official confirmation, but our understanding from some of our Dutch calls is that he was damaged his ankle in that crash earlier on today, so he unfortunately joins Adrian Huertas as a spectator for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, shit that for you. He was already planning to go under the knife during the off-season to alleviate some issues that have been fairly persistent over the last couple of months. But let's see how bad and serious that ankle injury is. We saw him in the box straight after the crash, and there was no obvious signs that he was in pain, but he certainly looked very cheesed off. I'm sure he knew he felt pain in his ankle, but something wasn't quite right. He went over to the hospital, and after we saw him on our screens, that yeah, it seemed as though there was confirmation that he has an ankle injury. Confirmed just yet, so diagnosis, but enough for you to be season prematurely, unfortunately, here in Valencia.
Real shame. A real shame for Adrian Huertas too. We remind you, just to reiterate, he's fractured both of his radii, his left and right radius, both fractured in a crash that we only saw sort of grainy trackside CCTV footage of, but it's a pretty nasty high side for the 99. It's not bad enough for this world. Huertas, one of those fractures is displaced, means it will require surgery in the coming days too. Huertas' rookie season does end early, leaving Moreira sole Italtrans rider for the rest of the weekend.
It's just a nightmare scenario, isn't it? At the last race of the season, you're just hoping to go into the off-season, clean bill of health, and able to focus on some rest and relaxation, which is absolutely deserved after a fairly punishing 22-round season. Start to gradually crank the training up once again. Gian Antonio was quite interesting talking about this yesterday. He said essentially, as a Grand Prix athlete, you've got January as the tour month to really take fitness down and into shape, and then basically you start traveling like incessantly, and then it's just about trying to keep up to a certain level. You do so much training between races and flying. Usual in London airports. So let's hope that having Vivacity is not in too much pain at the moment, and as well with that surgery we have on that displaced fracture. So it's a bit of a bum note to end the season on for the rookie, World Supersport champion.
Pleasant temperatures now for this practice session this afternoon. It does feel noticeably hotter than it was this morning, largely because the heavy cloud cover that we were covered by earlier on today has now moved away. Perhaps there are one or two fluffy white clouds overhead, but otherwise it's blue sky. Some conditions for this afternoon's practice session, so one thing that the chasers don't have to worry about is any rain interfering with the action. If you're wondering what kind of pace to expect in this session, the fastest lap we saw this morning, which is the fastest lap ever, and a Moto2 lap of Ricardo Tormo, 33.050 from Alex Escreech on board the forward. So expect, if conditions allow, laps in the 32s by the time we're done here this afternoon. Here's your wild card for the weekend, the 22 of Hector Garzo, who represents NTS in the Moto2 World Championship again for the first time in a couple of years.
It's a bit of a name from the past. The Japanese chassis manufacturer was a regular fixture in this championship for a couple of years with the RW Racing team. We step away, and I have to believe for the last few years that they're quite keen to come back into the Moto2 World Championship, but I'm sure what will happen in 2026, I don't think it will. Really heard anything to that effect in the rumour mill. Good to see Garza back here, good to see NTS back here as well. Always good variety of chassis on the Moto2 grid. And as Lewis mentioned, we might use the first half of this section at least to go through some of our much coveted, highly coveted end of season awards, looking back across the previous 21 races and rounds.
The third annual, fourth annual, something like that. Moto2 unofficial end of season award. But before we, I guess, look into the individual categories that we've looked on to decide the great, the good, and the not so good for Moto2 this season, it's a nice point on which to start is how much we've enjoyed Moto2 this season. Of course, Pirelli really did change the game in Moto2 coming into last season. We saw immense unpredictability. Not only have we seen the unpredictability continue into this season, but the quality of the racing in front of the field, I think, has been as good as we've ever seen in this Moto2 plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Moto2 had a bit of a golden age whenever it first came into existence as a championship, replacing the 250cc category. 2010, really say 2010 up until maybe 13. Marquez was a regular fixture in this class. It was producing some of the best racing anywhere in the world. And then I would say maybe the later years of Dunlop being in the class, the racing wasn't quite top notch, to put it mildly. It have many situations where riders would just settle in position on the first lap and came up full leader start with Pirelli. It has been a market change. A lot more need to manage the tyres over a full race distance, and that means that sometimes it's not always possible for riders to go flat chat on the first lap until the very end. A bit more management and strategy has to come into it. It makes it a little more interesting, I feel. For the viewer, you mentioned variety, Lewis, 10 different winners this year, absolutely sensational. That's a record for the intermediate class. 17 different podium finishers, not quite a record, but still very impressive indeed. More than half the grid have stood on the podium this year. And yeah, as you said, the quality of the racing. We're going to come on to best race as one of our categories for this year, but remember we did this awards back in 2023, and I was really scratching my head. Yeah. What was the best race that we saw this year? Because there wasn't a great deal to choose from.
Shall we work our way from bottom to top then? What will end with the Rider of the Year? Of course, it's the Blue Ribbon Award, if anyone cares about these sort of things, but we do here in the Coach World. So let's start with the performance of the year, I guess the best one-off ride of the season. As we're taking a look at Sergio Garcia, who goes into the top 10. The session currently led by David Alonso on 1:33.112. Which single performances in 2025 stand out to you? Of which there have been several.
Yeah, there have been several. I mean, I could make a case for Ages at Silverstone in his first victory. Not only did he do that, but he did so in dramatic circumstances right at the end of the race. He also did it when his bike was really undergeared. His team openly admitted after this that they got the game completely wrong, which meant that he was well done on top speed. Anytime we were on one of Silverstone's numerous long straights, despite that, he still managed to go through, fight through. It was quite a visible handicap. He was getting past on the straights pretty much every lap. He still managed to position himself towards the end, but you have to look at this rider here, some of the performances that he's mastered, and pick one of them. I mean, there have been quite a few of those, if we're being honest. That was remarkable. From what, 25th on the grid, right through to potential podium place. In fact, maybe even potential victory had he not made that mistake of trying to pass Jake Dixon. It was a little bit too soon to go with the curve. But to do that at the Saxon, one of the difficult places, one of the private tracks as well, making it very, very difficult was remarkable. I think I said at the time it was marking his heads how he fought through the field. I think I'm going to have to club for what he did last weekend in Portimao. Not only did he time his perfection over that weekend when he went pole position on Saturday, but that's how he managed the race, managed to manage his nerves as well during Sunday, and basically go in for the win when it really wasn't necessary. He could have come here with a 19-point advantage and it still would have been a fantastic position to be in. If he wanted to go strike all down as well and try and pass Colin Bay early on, just thought it was a really complete performance when the pressure was properly on. I thought it was a true champion's ride.
Talking about, just quickly, talking about the unpredictability of Moto2, just look at the standings at the moment. The championship contenders at the moment are on course for qualifying one, but this is still very, very early. Tony Arbolino's 33.069 is just under 2 hundredths of a second away from the all-time lap record of Alex Skridge earlier on today. I've also got a Diogo Moreira performance, one of two that I'm struggling to choose between. Diogo Moreira in Indonesia is the one that really stood out to me. It was a weekend which really saw the title decisively swing towards Moreira, of course, the Gonzalez disqualification. What impressed me so much about that particular Grand Prix is that his title rival, Manu Gonzalez, was a second behind him for almost the entire Grand Prix. Despite that, Diogo Moreira made no mistakes in the front of the field. He also pulled, as has done in quite a few Grand Prix lately, a spectacular last gas pole position out of the bag to deny Aguilar on that particular occasion. Once he took pole position and got the whole shot, he made Manu Gonzalez do the chasing. Gonzalez, in the end, could not chase him down. Celestino Vietti is chasing a little bit of grip on the outside of the exit of turn 12. The other performance that, this is how I was looking back through the season, trying to work out who impressed me, because I thought of Moreira, should I say, in Sachsenring as well, but I just can't separate how that race ended ultimately for Moreira. Had he completed that comeback, I think we would have had a very short discussion on the performance of the season. Danny Holgado's victory at Motegi for me was extraordinary. He hadn't shown too many signs through the weekend that he had the pace. Not to win the Grand Prix, his teammate goes down in the first sector on his current lap. Alonso is currently in third place, one spot behind Danny Holgado. Turn 2, Alonso has gone down with his fairly slow speed crash around this particular circuit. 70 kilometers an hour in second gear through turn 2, and he's already trying to recover back onto the racetrack. Take a look at his crash now. He's first bike up the road, just ahead of one of the MSI Boscoscuros, and his front end tuck for David Alonso. Yeah, Holgado at one point was, I think, 5 seconds up the road, wasn't he? In front of the field in that Japanese Grand Prix, as all sorts was going behind him. Ultimately, Jake Dixon just caught up in a little bit too much traffic to chase him down in the latter stages of the Grand Prix, but spectacular victory from Danny Holgado, who has taken 2 Moto2 victories this season. They've both been flights to flight cruises, haven't they?
Indeed, really impressive stuff. Agree more with you, Lewis. Those were very good nominations. I'll also just give a quick shout out to what Danny was able to do in Barcelona. Standing in as a substitute rider for injured Dennis Onju, and has been doing so for the majority of the second part of this season. There. second position for most of that race. Okay, he was demoted third late on, but that was a real breakout performance for Danny Munoz and showed that he's very much deserving a seat in this championship next year.
He's the breakout star of the year in Moto2 this season. There have been a few, in fairness. It's been one of the beauties of seeing such an unpredictable Moto2 season with the 17 different podium finishes. A few of those standing on a Moto2 podium for the very first time in their career. Also the rookies of David Alonso and Daniel Holgado. Also seen first-time winners this year in Moto2. Diogo Moreira of Denis Unchu, Ricardo St. Aegis, David Alonso as well. So many riders have broken out of the pack this season, which is a very difficult thing to achieve in Moto2. I really struggled to look past Barry Baltus for this one, who could yet end this season third in the World Championship. He's 25 points behind Manuel Gonzalez, so given that he's not won yet, he can't take second in the World Championship, even if he wins on Sunday. And Gonzalez fails fourth. But I guess why Barry Baltus's breakout performance this season catches our attention is that he's really elevated himself this season from the level that he might have been disrespectful against Barry Baltus, but many thought he had within him. Baltus, of course, spent his Moto2 career to this point, up until this season with the RW team. Of course, took a second place in Qatar, the first Grand Prix of the Pirelli era last season, but never really backed that up in 2025. But he's found a level of speed, a level of consistency, ability to manage tyres through the latter part of a Grand Prix, which has almost set him apart on occasions. And I feel if Baltus had a little bit of luck on certain occasions, perhaps not qualified so deep in the pack and found himself so deep in the field after 2 or 3 laps of a Grand Prix, he would have been talking about Barry Baltus as a Grand Prix winner. I think that's probably one thing that's missing from this Moto2 season in 2025 is a Barry Baltus victory.
Yeah. I'm going to nominate the same rider. Barry Baltus has been the revelation of Moto2 in 2025, absolutely no question. Remember when he was second fastest at the pre-season test at Breth, I thought surely he got a toll from his teammate Aaron Kinnett to be able to set that time. We looked at some of the lap-by-lap analysis and thought, oh no, he's actually consistently fast. We thought, okay, maybe it's just test when there's no pressure, but fairly quickly in the season we started to understand, no, this is actually real. We went back to Breth, fifth round of the season, he was second. In the next race he was in Le Mans, I believe. And yeah, I mean, the rider that finished 21st in the championship last year, okay, he had that podium at the very first race, but then after that went on and barely scored any other points. I don't think he was inside the top 7 any other race after that opening night podium in Qatar. We know that Barry obviously had some serious personal issues to deal with last year. The death of his mother was obviously a very, very disruptive event. It seemed as though just needed a bit of a change of scenery after a couple of years in the RW racing squad. But yeah, in this 5th season, he has been a model of consistency. 12 top 6 finishes. And previously, he had only scored 2 in 5 seasons. So he's been very fast. And also, that's what we said, Lewis. He used to be, about his own addition, quite cool. Remember back in the Commonwealth days, they would say, the worst car constellation. There's been several races this year where Baltus is unquestionably the fastest rider at the end of the race, like the race in Misano, where he very nearly followed Chelsea and Vietti. I think at Pool of Ireland as well. He was very strong towards the end of the race along the track where we know power conservation is very critical. So yeah, Baltus, take a ball. What a performance this year.
I guess if there's one Grand Prix you might look back on in 2025 and think that was the one that got away, perhaps the Saxonbury. And of course we had the red flag late in that Grand Prix when he was just lining up a move, wasn't he? He was just plotting out who was going to pass Denis Unchu in the closing stages, and of course we had that crash involving Alvaro Arenas and Marcus Ramirez into turn 1, which punctured the air fence and brought an early end to that Grand Prix. That may be the one that got away for Barry this year.
Yeah, and just a very quick shout out, you mentioned it previously, Daniel Holgado. I mean, I always rated Holgado, but not to this level. I didn't think he was going to come into Moto2 and win 2 races in his first year. And what's more, he's 6th in the championship ahead of David Alonso. David Alonso, who destroyed him last year. Okay, Holgado was 2nd in the championship. Holgado outscored him by 165 points in last year's Moto3 series. Holgado convincingly beat Alonso in this year's Moto2 championship and kind of be there right from the very first race. I mean, he was inside the top 10 in each of his first 4 Moto2 races. Absolutely sensational. And in the second half of the season, since the summer break, only Diogo Moreira has scored more points than him.
In the last 5 Grand Prix, the 2 Aspar riders are 2nd and 4th in the mini championship from the last 5 Grand Prix. So 69 points, Holgado 60. Really just put their hands up as potential title challenges for next season. Yeah, Holgado's my surprise of the year. That's the next category that we have on our list, and for very much the same reasons. Not that we expected him to struggle in Moto2, but just didn't expect him to get so quickly in this Moto2 class. And it's very clear through the last 12 to 18 months. You just need to speak to it in the paddock. He has matured an awful lot in the last sort of year to 2 seasons. His English has come on leaps and bounds as well. He is perhaps much more intelligent and considered than we gave him credit for in his Moto3 campaigns. And there's no question that Holgado is going to be a regular winner and surely title contender next season. The other one, on a more general point, just kind of going back to how we started this discussion, the surprise of the season is how unpredictable Moto2 has continued to be this season. Yes, you can understand why it was so unpredictable, why we saw so many different podium finishes last season, because it was the first season of the Pirelli era. I think most of us expected year 2 things to settle down a little bit and for some normality to descend on Moto2. And yes, we have had a clear hierarchy, a clear title battle amongst 5 riders, which of course has now been reduced to 2. But I think because the margins are so tight in Moto2, because the field is so competitive, yes, what Moto2 is providing us with is a platform that if one rider, one bike, one chassis, one tyre combination just gels with a certain Grand Prix weekend, then incredible results are possible, and long may this Moto2 predictability continue.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Lewis. Absolutely. My surprise of the year, my pre-season favourite. I think he was his pre-season favourite after his performance in the second half of last year. 4 victories in the second half of the year, and he some job of chasing down Igor. It was never really much in doubt last year's championship fight, but certainly Knet was the faster rider in the second part of 2024. And considering he was staying in a settled team, settled environment, pretty much the same personnel around him at the racing team, for Knet to have got to this year with just 1 win all season long, and really at no point to have shown the speed, the superior speed to his peers we saw in the second half of last year. Yeah, I did not foresee that coming, and yeah, I'd have to say it has been a big surprise for him to be 55 points back off the championship summit at this stage. I really thought this was going to be Knet's year.
1 win, and perhaps even more surprisingly, only 1 pole position this season too for Aaron Knet, because one thing we could usually trust Aaron Knet for was his explosive speed. Hasn't really had that in Moto2 this season, because we thought in the first half of the season he was the one doing the consistent stability job of challenging for the World Championship, kept himself very much in contention until around about the halfway stage of the season, and once it started to go wrong for Knet, it's gone very wrong. No scores in Brno when he was knocked off at the first corner, or crashed at the first corner when he was pushed wide. Didn't score in Barcelona either. Only scored a solitary point in Japan and in Malaysia. There are 4 Grand Prix in the second half of the season that Knet has essentially written off. Ultimately, with some spirited comeback performances, particularly in Indonesia when he came through to the podium, 21st on the grid, just about kept him in contention. Ultimately, too little, too late for Aaron Knet when Jaime Gonzalez and Diogo Moreira have taken 4 wins apiece and 9 podiums apiece. Just a solitary win and 6 podiums isn't going to do it. Aaron Knet, he's my disappointment of the year, or certainly from a riding point of view, my disappointment of the year. Just a rider who's fallen short of expectations, but I think we're going to be in agreement generally on our disappointment of the year, and it's not a rider but a constructor.
It is indeed, yeah. It's the constructor that took the first part of last year's Moto2 Championship by absolute storm. Constructor really have failed to live up to expectations in this year's Moto2 Championship.
Which has been easier to notice when they've doubled their output of constructors and chassis for the season. Of course, 8 riders on Moto2 Boscoscuros this season.
Yeah, exactly. Just have to look at the riders that are on the chassis this year and think, well, I mean, take 2, maybe even 3 of those riders. In fact, for sure, 3 of those riders should be up there fighting for Moto2 Championship. Jake Dixon, Chelison, Vietti from the Arbolino have shown in previous years that they could at least get into the cusp of the fight, but it's been quite remarkable just how far short they have fallen. I mean, Arbolino has had a nightmare year. Alonso Lopez, another name you could put in that list. how many top 10s Lopez had so far this year? I think maybe 6 or 7. A lot of those results were actually 10th places, so he's, aside from the podium in Kota, been wanting quite a great deal. And there's no question that Pirelli got a little bit riskier their tyre allocation this year after being very conservative in their first year in the class, understandably so. They realised everything was okay last year. They could probably go a good deal softer with the tyres that they brought to certain tracks. There's no doubt that shift to softer rear tyre level was a real hindrance to the Constructor chassis. They had turning, securing almost too much grip, and as a result of that, they found that they really couldn't turn quite as quickly and as skillfully in these years.
8 top 10s, but only 1 top 6 for Alonso Lopez, as Danny Munoz almost eyesights himself on the way out of 11. He was on course to potentially set a new all-time lap record. It is so close. I know we say it all the time in Moto2, but look at this. Less than half a second covers the top 20 in this session. 3/10 covers the top 14, which means at the moment, World Championship leader Diogo Moreira is not going through to qualifying 2 as of right. Here's the Munoz moment when the rear steps out of him. He caught Sergio Garcia's attention up the road. He'll have heard what was going on behind him as Munoz left the big black line and left below the lap time on the table. Gonzalez is up in 5th at the moment on a 1:33.244. We've got Arbolino and Holgado on 33.0s, Alonso and Dixon on 33.1s. We then have Gonzalez, Aegis, Lopez, Via, Vietti, Salach and Ortola all on 33.2s. Escrich, Arenas, Garcia, Ramirez and Adji all on 33.3s, with Moreira currently on 33.5. 4.5 of a second off the pace. Sounds like nothing, but he's currently in 19th position, 1 place ahead of Aaron Canet, who's also on course for qualifying 1. We've seen some spectacular battles in Moto2 this season. We've seen so many victories being decided on the last lap. We've seen some spectacular overtakes to secure those victories. Which is your favourite?
My favourite, undoubtedly, was the finale of the Aragon GP, when Denis Sonju spectacularly managed to reel in Diogo Moreira, who went into the final turn ahead, and then proceeded to pass him around the outside to take victory by, what, 0.03 of a second, I believe, coming across the line. The closest finish in Moto2 history, not quite the intermediate class, going all the way back to 1949, but since this class came into existence in 2010. And I mean, to do it at that turn, Aragon, one of the scariest turns you have at that particular circuit, do it around the outside as well, was quite spectacular. And on the rider who hopefully is going to go on and become champion. Hats off to Denis Sonju. I asked him, he's so strong in that last left-hander all weekend long, what's your secret? And he said, 2 big balls.
Who's going to argue with that? Fortunately, at the moment, though, Denis Sonju, between his legs isn't a problem. It's elsewhere that he's currently struggling, still working his way back to fitness after another big injury, which essentially ended his season back in the summer. We wish Denis Sonju all the best. We hope to see him fully fit once again for the start of 2026, when he'll be Aaron Canet, and what will be a fascinating pairing in the Constructor-backed Alpha BDS team for next season. My overtake of the year, well, it's another last lap overtake for a victory. It's David Alonso on Manu Gonzalez to win the Hungarian Grand Prix. I could have picked any one of Alonso's overtakes in that Grand Prix. Remember, that's at the top 10 at the end of the first lap, or partway through the first lap, at a circuit which we've been saying all weekend, you can't overtake around Balloton Park. David Alonso made complete mockery of that. On his way through the field, he produced all sorts of impressive lunges into turn 1, including on Jake Dixon, including on Aaron Canet. He also passed Diogo Moreira into there as well. But Alonso relying on the ball becomes up the by that, looking backwards at Alonso. It didn't look like he was anywhere near close enough to launch an attack from there. But Alonso did force Manu Gonzalez onto the paint, eventually cost Manu Gonzalez second place. It was the vintage David Alonso last lap pickle approach, which saw him securing victories in Moto3, which earned him his first Moto2 victory. As we followed Danny Munoz across the line, that is new all-time lap record. We are now into 132s, 132.868. Yeah, David Alonso, we were giving out an award for comeback of the season. Hungary might well be in it, and once again, with the 2 title front runners up ahead of him, in the end it was David Alonso who stole the limelight in Hungary.
Yeah, he was indeed. It was nicely into our next category, racing over to class. Does Hungary get your vote, Bruce?
21 contenders, I think, for this one. It's been so good. I narrowed this down to 3. in Moto2. Hungary was one of them. Australia was another, although the battles in that race were all behind the runaway leader, Senna Ages. Well, always, when I think of what makes a race of the year, you want constant overtaking, you want a lead change on the final lap, I think that also helps. Ideally, you would want the high stakes of the World Championship up for grabs as well, but ultimately it was way too early in the season for this one. And I'm going to go on and say not only is Silverstone my race of the year, I still stand by it. It's the best Moto2 race we've ever seen.
Yeah, I could argue with that. It also gets my vote as well. And I would also make the case. Vintage race, but Silverstone just had it all. There's no doubt that very windy, quite tricky conditions out there, which I think slowed the general pace down overall a little bit. As was Dimitri's lead group, five runners currently doing most of the running. He was never able to get clear the likes of Alonso, Diogo Moreira. Senna Ages was up there as well, and it was just box office stuff. And you said you obviously want a brilliant finale. You could call it a classic race. I had the finale of all finales, I think, in any mountain category this year, with Canet basically losing the lead going into oh no, it's the one before Vinterstone, sorry, just again in the back straight.
And then he tries to lunge back through on the way into Vale and cause all some man of chaos behind him.
Exactly, yeah. Senna Ages was just so well placed to benefit from that, come home and take his first victory. We also had a cool situation with an Australian, Brazilian and Colombian on the podium, and I think it was one of the first non-European Europeans on the podium time in the age as well. So yeah, so much to love about this race.
Which leads us to the rider of the year. I mean, for me, again, in this one, I narrowed it down to three potential contenders. Altus and Dan Morgado, we've already mentioned, who've been breakout stars this season. Do also want to give an honourable mention to Manny Gonzalez, who started the season, he was certainly the rider of the first half of this season, ultimately just hasn't been able to limit the damage in the second half of the season, subject to something dramatic like Moreira on Sunday. But given the level of consistency that Diogo Moreira has been operating at, as we discussed this morning, actually further back than we realised, all the way back to the start of the European season, Moreira, when things haven't gone wrong, has been a permanent top 4, top 5 contender. Moreira just about edges it for me as the rider of 2025. I'll see you.
Again, I can't talk about this. I think you're a very brave man to argue against Diogo Moreira. I mean, it's been the rider of the year, 2025. That consistency has been play. He's been ever present over the front in the second part of the season. He's comfortably outscored anyone in the last 5 races since we came back from the summer break. He's posted some of the most important and impressive performances of the year that we previously mentioned. And the fact that he's able to outscore his main championship competitor in 8 of the last 9, and basically he even 4-point swing in the championship in his favour. I mean, you mentioned earlier today, Lewis, who has ever come from that far back in an intermediate class championship ever. You're on the cusp of doing that. He just his second season in this category. Okay, he's had 2 more in Moto3, but still just in a short one year. He's remarkably impressive. So yeah, he gets my vote too.
And to just sneak in one extra bonus stat, because I want to give a shout out to one of our hard-working colleagues back in Barcelona who've got from our social media team. For the stats of the year, he's come up with this one earlier on today for me, not including the first ever Grand Prix season in 19 this year in Moto2, the first ever season where we've seen 3 brand new nationalities win a Grand Prix in that class across the team. The first Colombian, Turkish and Brazilian intermediate class victories this season. So I just want to give Luke a shout out for that, for all his hard work through this season and continuing through this weekend. And I guess as these final time attacks have come in, and we'll turn our attention to what's going to be 2026 in Moto2. Who's the Lally 2025 champion to crown Jorge's man in the first sector of this lap. It's going to affect Diogo Moreira's current lap as he enters the final corner. Manu Gonzalez, like Moreira, has now been bumped out of the top 14 slot at the moment. We've got the riders first, second and fourth in the World Challenge class at top right. Holgado, moments after taking top spot, he's crashed. So both Asphalt riders have gone down this afternoon. He's down at turn 2, the same Formula Alonso crash. So for the second Friday in a row, the Asphalt riders have gone down to the same gravel track.
He was absolutely flying. 2 lap records in succession for Danny Holgado, who is most certainly pushing on. Let's see what Manu Gonzalez can do on this particular lap as he comes out of turn 14, the final turn on the top of the straight. Jumps up to the second position with the flying lap, and Gonzalez with the minimum plus jumps into it. So suddenly we have one and two in the championship now 12th and 8th.
Shout out to Guevara for that, given his morning when basically wrote off this morning's free practice one session with 2 crashes. He's got second on a 32.6. Here is Holgado's crash. There's a deja vu from an Asphalt point of view, although a very different kind of crash that one. As he got all sorts of shapes on the way into the corner and then just took to the other side in the gravel trap. So both in the same corner, but really very different crashes for Holgado and for Alonso. Holgado's place in the top 14, though not under any great threat at the moment.
Just looking at the lines on the left of your screen there, you can see that Moreira, about a couple of riders behind, are able to by 1/10 of a second, then he will be outside the top 14. So I do feel that the Brazilian needs to improve. I don't think he's going to do so on this current lap. He's around half a second off through split number 3.
The rider we should be watching is Jake Dixon. He's coming out the final corner now. Here he is, currently in 18th place. This should put Moreira down a place from here. It's gone up into 6th. That's receiving it, but some time. Munoz takes second, and now Dixon moves ahead of Munoz into second place. Moreira has now been bumped out of the top 14 with Ortola up into 9th. We've now got Constructor second, 4th, 5th, 9th, 11th, 13th, all inside the Q2 place at the moment. Gonzalez isn't exactly safe himself. He's now been relegated to 12th spot. He now comes across the line up behind Fernandez, and he finds 4 places into 8th.
Deep breath inside the intact GP box as Gonzalez manages to do that. Moreira, you can see, is already pulled out of this lap, but we will not be improving as it stands. And this could be a little bit of jeopardy here for the Moto2 World Championship going into tomorrow. As I said, Moreira looked so cool and calm no matter what happened to him in Portimao. Crucially, he was able to get inside the top 14 at the end of Friday afternoon. He's a lot less clear cut here. 1 week later in Valencia, unconnected flying 21st. He jumps up into 14th place, so another place demoted for Moreira.
So this morning, Alex's Scripture were keeping an eye on. He said at 33.0, and the all-time lap record. That lap time now would not even get me through to Q2. A Scripture up into 5th place, underlining what a fine job the Ford rider is doing right now.
Yeah, it's an impressive day for Alex's Grids. Really, really impressive stuff. Just have to forward announcement they'll be using WP
100ths of a second. And Diogo Moreira at the moment staring at a surprise qualifying one. Last time we saw Diogo Moreira in qualifying one was back in Renault, of course, when he only turned up to serve the penalty.
He's quite considerably injured him, but then bruised on that particular occasion. The reason why he was so slow, you can see his time has gone away massively in that second split. So Diogo Moreira, he's not going to have time to come in and fit new tyres at the end of this session list. He could be looking at a spot in Q1 tomorrow.
Another idea to take the fight for his crash early on is Alonso. He's down in 21st now. His 33.112 that he set very early on in the piece. He has improved upon that, set his best lap time on his third lap of the session, his second time lap, and no signs of improvements at the moment on the 80 either. So at the moment, some serious shocks. Aaron Canet heading for Q1, David Alonso heading for Q1, and so too Diogo Moreira. He now exits or rounds the final corner, turn 14, and just how much jeopardy hangs over this title battle is going to be decided in the next 92 seconds or so.
Yeah, absolutely. In Q1 tomorrow, of course, because if the likes of Canet, Salax, Lopez, and Renas are also in Q1 and David Alonso, then it's by no means a given that Diogo Moreira on the form of today is going to progress through that, which must be really pleasing to hear for Impact GP squad. You can see Manny Gonzalez is not going to improve at this time, but it doesn't really matter. I think the best of the early rear tyres is done. We're not seeing too many improvements on our timing screens, and that could well be it.
So much of 2025 has been about Diogo Moreira looking a little bit under par, but then just pulling out the bag when he needs it on a Friday afternoon or on a Saturday afternoon in qualifying. If Moreira does it again here, then this really will touch the spirit and the optimism of Intact GP. Jorge Navarro making sure he stays well out of the way, but Moreira has lost so much time. He's already 6/10 of a second down. He needs to pull back another quarter of a second in the second half of the lap to get through. So we'll at least take Moreira to the third sector yet before we completely call this. As he now rounds turns 9, 10 and 11. And Holgado not watching as we are to see how the championship leader gets on. Holgado is still quickest despite his crash at turn 2. He's now 7/10 down. The story of day one here on this title deciding weekend in Moto2. The world champion leader, Diogo Moreira, is in qualifying one.
I don't care how cool you are, how well you're able to deal with pressure, you will be feeling some serious pressure tonight. Q1 tomorrow, you will not want to miss it. It's Diogo Moreira tries to get through that inside the top 4 positions, along with the likes of Canet, Salax, Lopez, Renas, and Lopez. This is far from an ideal situation for the championship leader.
19th place at the end of day one. You have mentioned the first time he's been in qualifying one was the Czech Grand Prix back in July, and of course he was far from 110. Of course, the time before that was Saxonbury. Of course, when he famously came from 25th on the grid to nearly finish on the podium. So Moreira has got set at the start of the session. There was one banana skin that he might slip over this weekend. Friday practice was it. Moreira has slipped.
That's indeed true. Right indeed, Lewis. The only saving grace for him is Friday is rarely when he shows his best. He does normally find himself and his way into the weekend. He do that in Portimao, for example, but one more jeopardy on the line this time around. Just a little glimpse of hope for Manny Gonzalez, who, as he's previously said, hasn't quite shown speed today, which suggests that he's going to be able to break clear of everyone on Sunday. He's definitely close to the front of Moto2 so far. But it's good to have a extra bit of motivation and hope as well. It could still be possible if Saturday was not working out his way.
Combination of Moreira's first Q1 Gonzalez does not win at the Valencia Grand Prix on Sunday, then it does not matter what Diogo Moreira does. He is champion anyway. So not all lost by any means for Diogo Moreira today, but just had perhaps a little layer of nerves that he could have done without.
Yeah, let's face it, a bit of entertainment for us. We thought it was a done deal, and we were talking about it earlier today. It really does take a lot to get Diogo out of his stride. Andy Gonzalez getting a warm round of applause from the MotoGP squad after a solid performance today. Was it a couple of moments when it looked as though he could well be on top 14, but instead it's his battle round with Diogo Moreira.
A good twist then on this final Friday of the season in Valencia. Holgado, despite his late match, top practice from Jake Dixon and Danny Munoz. Ivan Gavar, despite going down twice this morning, took fourth ahead of Alex Bridge. Top five in both sessions for the forward rider. Center age is sixth ahead of Chelsea Novetti, Barry Baltas, Tony Arbolino and Manu Gonzalez 10th. He's through the Q2, joined by Vaya Garcia, Ortola and Ramirez. The big story though is there, P19. Diogo Moreira misses automatic Q2 for the first time since run-out. Only in that Q1 session. Two of the other top seven riders in the World Championship, Aaron Canet and David Alonso, who also paid the price for crashing in turn 2. Session. The big story though is that the World Championship leader Diogo Moreira has made life difficult for himself. Diogo into Q1 tomorrow with Gonzalez straight into Q2. This Moto2 title battle is not done yet. MotoGP practice is coming up.
Circuit here in Valencia, 2.489 miles to be precise, 14 corners, 5 of them right, 9 of them left. Each start-finish straight which measured just under 900 metres in length. Heavy braking into turns 1 and 2, through 4, 5 and 6 in front of the stadium section here. So be careful through turns 4 and 10, those right-handers which can catch you out on the right-hand side of the tyre. And it's always tricky downhill braking zone into turn 14. 1, 2 and 8 are the most demanding corners for the brakes here in Valencia. course, at home in Phillip Island a few weeks ago. Second place is Best Friday Morning, falling Rukagura. Aleix Spargo third. The top three all ran fresh rubber at the end of FP1 this morning. Ralph Hernandez was an excellent fourth place in his injury return. Morbidelli, Alex Marquez, Joan Mir, Pedro Acosta, Fabio Di Gianantonio, and Augusto Fernandez, while playing on the new Yamaha V4, rounding out the top 10 this morning. That's a real change, definitely this afternoon, as riders going to time attack mode, approaching the final Q2 session of the season. Further down the order, dominant Portuguese Grand Prix winner Marco Bezzecchi, he was 18th. Still doing some very strong lap times though on well-worn tyres. Pecco Bagnaia was down in 21st place. Best time we saw this morning was set by Jack Miller, one of 8 riders to find sub 131 laps in those cool conditions this morning. New medium front, new medium rear tyre for Miller, so he will finish 0.3 of a second clear of the chasing pack. That's in the commentary box to Lewis Sullivan, as always, talking you through our final Friday afternoon practice of the season. Jack Appleyard, thanks for getting some sunshine now. Down in what was an increasingly warm pit lane. We welcome back Maverick Vinales and Jorge Martin for this farewell Grand Prix of 2025. What about HRC? They've been a tough Portimao Grand Prix last weekend after a very positive flyaway run for the Japanese manufacturer. Japanese was 7th place this morning, just